All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Hostaway webinar. We're still waiting for Zoom to let people in. And we're going to wait about 45 more seconds so everyone can join us. I usually have a lot of guests on these webinars, but this one I'm going to do solo, and it's on a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. We're just going to wait a little bit more so everyone is getting let in, and then I'll share some ground rules. So first of all, we're gonna this is being recorded. It's going to be available on YouTube, and I would like as many of you to ask as many questions as you can using the QA section. I think the chat is enabled. You can also send a message there about where you're from and how many properties you have. It looks like the chat doesn't work for me. So any questions for me, just put them in the QA section. So, all right, let's get started. So this month's webinar is about how to avoid pitfalls when converting long-term rentals to short-term rentals. It might seem to be an obscure title, but to be honest, I've stayed in over 60 short-term rentals just in the last couple of years, and I think almost 100 in my entire life. And every time I have a bad experience, I would want to find out why, and I try to talk to the owner, talk to the property manager. And there's one trend that I've been finding, and it's that usually a bad experience, the reasoning behind it is, oh, I just converted this from a long-term rental to a short-term rental. That being said, I've stayed in great places that just were converted from long-term rentals to short-term rentals, and I thought let's go through these things on a webinar, because it seems that it's fairly common for people to make some very basic mistakes when doing this. So if you are managing or owning even just one property, and you either have converted it into a short-term rental or you're considering doing it, this is the webinar for you. Also, if you are managing hundreds or even thousands of properties and you're considering converting some of them from long-term into short-term rentals, this is the webinar for you. So with that said, let's dive right in. Let's see if we can get the next slide. So who am I to talk about this? First of all, my name is Marcus from Hostaway. Hostaway is the leading all-in-one short-term rental software. We provide a platform that helps you manage multiple vacation rentals. We're a global company. We got our team all over 100 staff members, and we got thousands of customers, ranging from people who own just a few properties to property managers who manage thousands of properties. We're one of the only companies in the world that is a preferred plus partner of Airbnb and lead partner with Verbo and a premier partner with Booking.com. And yeah, we work with thousands of property managers. But not only that, I'm also a super host on Airbnb. And just this winter, I rented 5 different homes down in the Southwest Florida area and stayed there with my family 1 month per home. And that's what gave me inspiration to host this webinar. So that's a little bit about us. Now let's get to the topic. All right, so first I wanted to share a little bit of the logic here on why people are converting long-term rentals into short-term rentals. First, and this is so that people can, so that you can think, does this apply to you? First of all, it's a more flexible use of the asset. A fairly common challenge that I see people struggling with, especially if they have a second home, is if you rent it out long-term, it's a stable cash flow. But if you keep it empty, you can use it whenever you want. Having a short-term rental gives you that flexibility where you can have some cash flow, but you can also use it yourself. At the same time, bigger property managers, there is some value to having overlap there, especially if you happen to be in an area where corporate travel is is popular and you're able to rent it out to people for several months at a time, especially in off season, then it's extremely valuable to have a flexible use of the property. One that many people are attracted to, and that I will break down shortly, is higher returns. Overall, as a rule of thumb, usually the gross returns are higher, but what many people fail to realize is that the net returns might actually be lower in a short-term rental. And that's something that I wish people would check out before they get started. Now, I put in here this lower risk of big maintenance costs, and I can name two very specific examples. First of all, if you're keeping a property empty, that's a big risk because things can go wrong and you don't notice them. If you're in the cold, pipes can freeze, they can burst. If you're in the heat, your air conditioning might stop working and you might have mold everywhere. These are things that you don't notice unless there's someone there. And having a property as a long-term rental doesn't eliminate all of these risks, because sometimes when you rent out a property, the person living there may not understand that there's something wrong. For example, maybe the roof is leaking, but they never went upstairs. Maybe a bad example, but you get the point. There are things that happen. Someone might have been living in a house for 10 years. They never thought of raising an issue. But having multiple people with multiple viewpoints gives a really good upside in terms of lower risk. Many people go into this because they can add value to the service. Typical example here would be someone owns a wedding venue, perhaps a restaurant, and there's no places to rent nearby except a motel where their guests don't like to stay. Well, if you happen to own property in the area, turning it into a short-term rental is a great value-added service. And there's many other values that can be added on top of that as well, that can help you pay those bills. Now, one reason why many people often convert their long-term rental to short-term rental is they want to see, is this an industry that could work out for them? Now, it's much easier to scale into becoming a property manager if you own your first property yourself. So a lot of property managers, they actually own one or several properties themselves. How long is this session, is asked by Mariam. I think we're not going to do a full hour. It'll probably be 20 minutes, and it will depend on the questions as well. Alex is asking about monitoring tech. I'll come into that soon, but now let's move forward. Can we have next slide? All right, so starting out, this is where I see most of the converting properties go absolutely wrong. What many people think is that they take let's say a house. You have a house that's been rented out long term, the tenants move out, and then you just go and buy used furniture, put it there, and think that it's going to be short-term rental. This is about 90% of the bad experiences I've had are exactly like that. So what's wrong with that approach? Well, there's quite a few things that can go wrong there. First of all, the amenities that you need, if you want to stay somewhere, it's not enough to put a sofa in the middle of the room, install a TV. That's simply not enough, because the sofa has to be comfortable. And just to give an example here, it's very common to see, especially smaller houses with many bedrooms, they might have bed space for 10 people, but there's nowhere 10 people can have dinner, because the kitchen table only takes 6 and the sofa only fits 3. Well, if you're staying there with 10 people, it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. And that's something that you need to plan. And that's a very easy mistake to make if you're used to renting out long-term, because in long-term, you see that different people use the space in different ways. And not everyone needs to sit in the sofa at the same time. But keep in mind, if you're doing short-term rentals, it needs to actually be comfortable. And that's your responsibility. Another thing that you need to think about is, what are the amenities? Because when you're renting out long-term, people know the area. Typically, people don't just decide to move and rent a house that they have never seen and then live there for the next 10 years across the country. But you'd be surprised when people decide to rent a house for 1 week, they'll be happy to do it without ever seeing it and from way across the country. Now, what they don't know is they don't know the neighborhood. They don't know what can be done there, what to do there. They also don't know what to expect. And this is where doing your research before you convert into a short-term rental is incredibly important. A good example here is if you do your research, you should probably pretend to be a traveler yourself and go and look at which options are available. If it turns out that all the other places in your area have a pool and you don't, probably there's a reason for that. Also, if all the other properties are advertising certain venues, maybe they're close to an exhibition place, maybe they're close to the beach, maybe they're close to the mountains, probably that's what you should do as well. But it's quite common to see when you search for a place to see these properties that have just been converted because they're lacking all of this. And when you go there, there's no board games. There might be a TV and a fire stick, but when it's time to take out the barbecue, you find no equipment for that. So it's very important to keep in mind that you have to go all in with this. You have to think about who is going to stay there and what are they going to do. It's not enough to just throw some furniture in a house and think that it's short-term rental. Now, to the question on technology, there's a lot of things that you can do to change a house. So first of all, there's monitoring tech, noise and smoke. Minute and Noise Aware are big brands in the space. You should definitely install a smart thermostat, but you should not make the mistake that most property managers or owners tend to do, which is stay up all night and look at the thermostat on your mobile phone. That just doesn't work. You're just going to freak yourself out. Let the guests adjust their temperature. That's what they're paying for. And if it costs you too much money, then increase the rates. You should definitely install a smart lock. I don't understand how anyone can get by without that. A lockbox might be used, but it's still, when someone arrives in the cold and the dark middle of the night trying to find that lockbox, finds out that it's not working, that's a really bad experience for any guest. So this is the type of technology you definitely want to invest in. All right, let's take the next slide. Okay, now something that a lot of people don't think about is regulations, money, and taxes. First of all, very few areas in this world actually prevent you from buying a home and renting it out. But you have to figure out what the regulations are when it comes to short-term rentals. And they can be on many different levels. So you can have, if you have a condo or even a house, you might have an HOA that has their own rules. You might have the city rules, county rules, and state and country rules as well. So make sure you find those out before you start making investments in smart technology and marketing your place, because otherwise it can get very expensive for you. Another thing that people really don't do is budget out what things cost. And that can be really embarrassing from a guest experience. I've quite often as a guest, I've ended up asking, hey, how did you end up doing this? How come things are like this? For example, I stayed in a place that advertised a swimming pool, but turns out the swimming pool was empty, so you couldn't use it. And I asked them, hey, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit your thought process when you advertise a swimming pool, and it turns out you don't actually have one. He said, yeah, well, how can I afford to maintain it? Well, maybe that's something you should have put in a spreadsheet before you listed your property on a short-term rental platform. Another thing that people miscalculate is taxes. In most places, when you rent out a home, that's a commodity. It's not taxed. But if you do rent out short-term, you are in most places running a business, and that you have to pay taxes on. Just being aware of these things will save you from a lot of trouble. And it will also put a lot less pressure on your guests. All right, next slide. So this is the hardest one, the cleanings and maintenance. Yeah. So when you're doing long-term rentals, it's quite easy to find a cleaner who can do cleaner in between tenants. And it's quite easy to find maintenance that can go in and check things, check the furnace, check the air conditioning, check the plumbing, check the general aesthetics of the house. But this, I think, is my biggest pet peeve, is when you have remote owners who don't go to the property and they just hire a cleaning company in between the guests. Now, the challenge with that is that a cleaner who goes into a property, they're gonna take whatever is dirty that they see and they're gonna clean it. Let's say if there's dust on the floor, they're gonna remove the dust. If the dishes aren't done, they're gonna do the dishes. What a cleaning company can't do is figure out what experience is this property supposed to give. For example, if they see three dirty plates, they can clean those plates and they'll be clean. But what the cleaner doesn't know is that the place is actually suited for 6 people, and the correct number of plates for 6 people is of course 12, because you need to shift. Now, this is something that will make many properties deteriorate very quickly. I mean, you can have just 10 turnovers with guests. Someone breaks, you see on the picture here, soap bottle. Well, it's broken. Cleaner's not going to notice that because their job is to clean what's dirty. You didn't tell them to check if there's a soap bottle left in every bathroom. And there's so many things that can go wrong if you don't get someone in place to manage the property. Actually, having a property manager is usually a shortcut, but they can be expensive, and that's for a good reason. So don't make that mistake that many long-term landlords do, to think that you can just hire someone to clean it in between stays. That's not how any of this works. If you need clarification on that, please add it to the Q&A. All right. Now, this is the biggest issue that I see people struggling with. Now, when you are renting out a long-term property, you may think that it's the same property as a short-term rental or a vacation rental, but in fact, there's a world of difference. When you rent out a long-term property, that's a commodity. It's like a barrel of oil. You can sell it here or you can sell it there, but it's still a barrel of oil. Same thing if you got gold, you can sell it. You can turn it into a watch, maybe into a ring, but it's still gold. It's a commodity. The same thing for a long-term rental. It's a commodity. It doesn't matter how much lipstick on a pig you put on, it's still going to be just a rental place. However, when you convert it into a vacation rental or short-term rental, people are not buying the right to stay at that property. Instead, they're buying a service. And if you don't believe me, just go in on any forum, any group, any discussion between people who rent out short-term and read any discussion about unrealistic guest expectations. There's a lot of people in the space that do not seem to grasp the concept that what the guests are buying when they're renting the place is not the place itself. They're buying a service. And what has to be delivered to them is not the place itself. What has to be delivered is a service. A bit like a restaurant. You could think that a restaurant is just selling pieces of food, but that's actually not at all what they're doing. It's not about the food. It's about the service. The fact that you can enter there, you know you can get food, someone will bring it to you, someone will recommend what it is you take. This is the exact same thing. There's a difference between a grocery store and a restaurant. One of them sells a product and a commodity at that, and the other one sells a service. And this is the number one biggest challenge for long-term landlords to understand, that they have to stop with the grocery store model, where basically if it isn't there, well, go to some other store. They have to start thinking about the service. They have to understand people who are staying in the property, they paid a certain price to be in that location, and they expect certain services. A good example here is if you're a long-term tenant and something stops working, maybe the heating, maybe the plumbing, maybe the air conditioning, you understand that things take time. I mean, if it was your own home and the air conditioning doesn't work, maybe it takes 3 days to get that fixed. That's something a long-term rental tenant will understand. They will understand that if the quickest you can do to fix it is 3 days, then that's the quickest you can fix it. Now, a short-term rental guest will not understand that because they didn't pay for the opportunity of having the luxury of owning a home and waiting for the air conditioning to be fixed. If the air conditioning breaks, they might be staying a week. You can't just say, yeah, it's going to take 3 days. No, that's not how any of this works. What you have to do is offer something in return. And that's because they paid for a functioning air conditioning. They didn't pay for a broken air conditioning. If they wanted that, they would have bought a home, but instead they went on vacation. And yeah, please put it in the QA section if you disagree here, but I think this is really the biggest pitfall of them all. Now, on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing. This is something that, once again, is very easy to spot, that a lot of people struggle with finding out how to market your property. Now, those of you who have been here before, you probably know I'm going to say you should sign up for Hostaway and then get listed on Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com. But I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Instead, what I'm going to say is that there is a unique target audience that would like to stay at your property. You need to figure that one out. And if you don't, if you just make assumptions, for example, maybe you've been renting it out long-term and you've been renting it out to families with 1 or 2 young kids in the past. Well, if you make the assumption that those are the people who are going to come on vacation or stay in your short-term place and then start marketing with that assumption, you're almost guaranteed to fail. You will end up with unhappy guests because there's going to be an elderly retired couple who are looking for a romantic getaway, and it turns out that your place was catering families with kids. That's not going to work at all. Now, how do you do this marketing? Well, the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that you have preconceived notions because you probably have experience in renting it out long term. What that actually means is that you know the people who live in the area, you know who they are, and because you've been renting to them, you've been selling them a service, actually providing a commodity, which is long-term rentals. Now, you have to admit to yourself that you do not know who is coming for short-term stays, because I can tell you it's not the locals. People are looking for long-term housing. I mean, if you live in a house on a street, would you go on vacation to your neighbor next door? Probably not. Probably you would go somewhere else to experience something else in life. I mean, if you just wanted to sit in the backyard and look at the trees, you can do that in your own backyard. It doesn't make sense to go on vacation in your neighbor's property. But you, as the landlord, you do not know who are the people who are looking to come in to vacation or stay in your place. But there's one easy way to find out, and that's to simply go on search engines, go and look on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, check out how are the other properties marketing themselves. If everyone else claims to be the perfect spot for a beach holiday, or all the other properties claim to be the perfect place for a midterm stay for traveling professionals and nurses, well, then that's probably what you should be. But then when you market that, you need to make sure that the property matches that. Just to give an example, if you're a traveling professional, you're going to need a fast internet connection. If someone is looking for a beach vacation, they're going to need beach toys and probably instructions on how to get to the beach. I'm stating the very, very obvious here, and I'm trying to simplify it. But I'm only doing that because I have personally had so many bad experiences with properties that are doing it wrong. All right, now pricing, how to set the rates. this is something that that also seems to be a big barrier, because remember that spreadsheet that I told you need to set up before you even go live with your property, before you start buying furniture. That one needs to dictate your price, but actually it's the market that dictates the price. And this is where you should be using a dynamic pricing tool. Now, there are companies out there such as AirDNA, Transparent, Price Labs that help you estimate how much the gross returns are going to be. But for a long-term landlord, it's pretty common that you set a certain price and you see what kind of applications come in, if any, and then you can adjust that. In short-term rentals, it doesn't work at all like that. What you need is either decades of experience, which you don't have, or you need a dynamic pricing tool. It's that simple. You can use Price Labs Beyond, Wheelhouse. There's actually, go in on hostaway.com/marketplace. I think there's 7 or 8 of them there. Check out them all, but you really need the rates to be there. Now, there's one caveat to that. 3-bedroom house is not the same as another 3-bedroom house, because they have different amenities. Some have a pool, some look really nice, some look really old and not so nice, some have good reviews, some have bad reviews. Now, your prices need to reflect that. Now, if you start looking around what the competition is pricing themselves at, you'll quickly find that there's a divide. There's the high-end prices and the low-end prices, maybe the mid-tier prices. The difference there is the guest expectations. Now, if you put yourself in the high tier, you will still get people booking the place. But keep in mind that the higher price they pay, the more they expect from you as a service. And then you need to have a very serious conversation with yourself in front of the mirror and ask yourself, am I willing to go the extra mile for every guest? If you're not, that's completely fine. But then you need to lower the guest expectations. And you can do that by being in the mid-tier or in the lower tier. And this is very easy to do. You just take any weekend or any week, a bit out, do maybe 2 or 3 months out, and then go and check what is the competition charging. I guarantee you'll find a similar property to yours at 200 a night, at 300 a night, and at 400 a night. And then all you got to ask yourself is, what kind of service level are you willing to prepare or give? If you give very high service, good service to your guests, then by all means charge 400. But if you want to be on the safe side, charge 200. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Now I'm going to answer these questions here. So first of all, Sergio, you're asking about how to get mid-term. You have 6 months of low season, all your properties short-term rentals. How can I manage my listings not to be penalized by Airbnb by having blocked the units for 6 months? It's a good question. If you have them mid-term, that means that you have individually cut a deal, or you have got somewhere people who say, I'm going to rent it for the low season. How do you make sure you don't get penalized? Now, I'd like to break a couple of myths here. First of all, there's no such thing as being penalized by Airbnb. And I'm going to expand this and say this goes for every single OTA. And I can say that since we're in pretty good status with all of these OTAs. So first of all, they have no financial incentive to penalize or to reward you in any way whatsoever. They do have financial incentive to make money because they're businesses. Now, the way they make money is that they get travelers on their website, and they get a lot of them. In fact, they even pay to get travelers to come to the website. If the traveler finds something they like, property that they like, and they do end up booking it, that's when they make money. So every action they take in every piece of their business is going to be focused on getting that person on the website to book a place. And this is why some people have the misconception that they get penalized if they drop in the search results. I actually Those of you who have seen me in the Facebook groups, I actually saw a question from someone who said, "Oh, why are things so slow? I'm not getting booked at all." And it was a cottage for the summer. I went in on her Airbnb link that she had posted, and she's fully booked for every single weekend for 3 months straight. Well, yeah, of course you're going to drop in ranking because your place isn't available. And her comment to that was fairly interesting. She said, "Okay, but how do I get these? I have 3 nights in June that aren't booked yet." And I just have to say, I'm sorry, you already won. You're already fully booked. I mean, those 3 nights, you have a 90% occupancy rate. You won the game. There is no more game to play. You already won. So Sergio, the OTAs, if you have an attractive property and it's available, and if they think a guest is going to book it, and you can figure that one out yourself, just go and search on the OTA and see, are there more attractive properties nearby? Let's say yours is blocked when you want to rent it out and someone else's is available, then obviously they're going to book the available one. But maybe yours is available and another one very similar reviews is available for half the price. That's when they're going to book that one. And every OTA is focused just on making money. They will put the right property in front of the right guest. I hope that answered your question a little bit. Now, anonymous attendee here, I don't know, you seem to be coming to every one of my webinars. I love that. Nice to see you again. He's asking, you said holiday lets generate more revenue than long-term let. Is there any figures on average? No, there's actually markets where long-term rentals generate a higher return than short-term rentals. And one reason for that is that some markets are incredibly prohibitive for landlords to operate in, but at the same time, they do not regulate short-term rentals. So a lot of property owners choose to do only short-term rentals, even though the return is lower than a long-term rental. If you want to find more stats, whatever your region is, you can find any local real estate agent can give you stats on long-term rentals. And I would recommend, instead of looking at generic stats for short-term rentals, I would look at property-specific stats that you can find at AirDNA, Transparent, and Price Labs, and then just compare for your area. Keep in mind, though, these numbers are gross, and your actual bottom line will depend. There's no website that's going to tell you that. This is why it's so important to put up the spreadsheet. So I'll give one example. Some places will be rented out exactly 26 weeks of the year, and they'll be rented out exactly 1 week at a time, which means you're going to pay a cleaner 26 times. Other places will have average 3-night stays, and they'll be rented out 200 times. No, not 200 times a year, 100 times a year. In that case, you're going to pay a cleaner 4 times more. Now, the price of that cleaning will, of course, differ per region as well. And this is something that nobody will tell you. There's no calculator for that. And that's why you have to put up the spreadsheet. I mean, you can make really nice profits if you can just hire a cleaner for $20 an hour in Manhattan and expect a good job. Unfortunately, reality doesn't work that way. And this is why there's no stats there. How do you handle cities with no STR permit and a no STR rule? It's super simple. You don't do short-term rentals. If you want that flexibility in managing your asset, in other words, real estate, if you feel like long-term rentals is not the way you want to go, what you should be looking into is for example, corporate rentals. So many of these cities that have strict regulations, they still have people who come in and they want to stay for 6 months, they want to stay for 12 months, and they need a place to live. Quite often, these are business people who might be moving there temporarily for a project, and they want to bring their family, and the company is willing to pay for that. Look into that, because then you get the flexibility that you won't have it rented out long-term, but you won't get the return of short-term rentals, but this is a way that you can get a bit the best of both worlds, mid-term stays. Now, Alex would like to hear your thoughts on preventive maintenance as well, if you got a spare minute. Alex, I would like to elaborate on that question. Preventive maintenance, honestly, the best thing you can do is just make sure that you follow your reviews. Because when people are renting your place, they're going to be buying a story. That story is told mostly in the pictures, but somewhat in your title of the property and in your description. If your title says luxury waterfront villa, then people will have an idea that it's luxurious. Now, even though you take pictures today and they look very luxurious and the place is luxurious, when you have enough guests, it's just not going to be luxurious anymore. And that's something that you can track in the reviews. Same thing with the number of coffee cups. If you rent out a place for 8 people, but you only 6 coffee cups, well, it's not luxurious. When you finally made coffee and you realize that 2 of your friends are going to be without coffee. These are things that are quite hard to prevent unless you do regular inventory checks. But I mean, you can't check everything, but what you can check is the reviews, because if you have a place that's not maintained properly, that can be okay as long as the expectations are on the same level. Because short-term rental guests are not as picky as social media would like you to believe. They actually can be flexible, and they understand, just like if they stay in a cheap hotel, they understand they're going to get a cheap hotel. If they stay in a cheap short-term rental, they understand it as well. So yeah, but please elaborate on the question. Now, Mariam is asking, what's the average cost of having a property manager? Thank you for listening to that. I would say that as a percentage of the nightly rate, you would end up paying around 20%. It completely depends on the area. Some areas have extreme competition. You might go down to 15. I've even seen 13 or 10. Some places are just inaccessible. And this can be, for example, a mountain region that's far away from any big city. There you would see 25, even 30, 35%. But somewhere along that, I'd say if you're paying between 10 and 35%, you're not far off. It's worth keeping in mind, though, that property managers, the actual commission, that's just an incentive structure. They make money in other ways as well. And so for some of them, that commission is almost irrelevant because they're able to sell other services to go along with it. Now, Alex is saying it's the experience the customer is paying for. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, I wanted to share one of my worst experiences this winter as I was staying in Florida, and tell you what actually inspired me to create this webinar. So I had rented a place in I'm not going to name the city, but let's just say Southwest Florida. And actually, I rented 5 of them. So, and they all looked the same to me, but there was one that really stood out. And I found out why it was so incredibly strange. Turns out what the owner of the property had done before he bought the property, he had bought the property next door, and it was a 3-bedroom house. But instead of renting it out to a family for a 3-bedroom house, he split it in 2. He put a wall in between and rented it out to one student and then a drug dealer. And then when the property next door came for sale, he decided to buy that one too, because he made such good money on that. And he decided to put it on Airbnb. Now, as you can imagine, staying next door to a drug dealer with a shared backyard, that was his great plan, is not a fun experience. And what I learned from that is that some people just shouldn't be landlords in the first place. But yes, Alex, it is the experience the customer is paying for. Sometimes the experience they get is a little bit more than they asked for. Melissa asked here if we offer 24/7 guest concierge services for STR property managers and hosts. I assume by you mean Hostaway. We do not, but we have many partners on our marketplace that offer those kind of services. Thank you for asking. Then let's see here. Alex, thanks for all the questions. I believe a listing could get suspended on Airbnb after one too many customer complaints. Right. That's exactly what's happening. Now, remember how I said these OTAs, they want to make money. Now, they can get people to buy. That's actually what they do all day when they go to work. They try to get people to buy. But if what they're buying is a bad experience, business isn't going to last very long, because what they actually want people to do is buy once and then come back and buy more later. That's what every business wants. And this is why it's so important for Airbnb and other OTAs to make sure that there's a good experience. And yes, if too many guests complain, Airbnb makes more money if they remove that property off their platform, which they have every right to do because they're in the money-making business, and everyone who works with them agrees. You actually sign some terms that say that you're in the money-making business as well. Elva is asking, how do I determine where is it legal to use as STR? Usually, I would say Google it, but if you don't receive an answer on Google, that's probably a really good thing, because in the places where it's not allowed to do STR, short-term rentals, it will come up very quickly on Google. But just to be sure, go in on a local group. For example, Facebook has a lot of very local communities, whether it's state or city or even neighborhood level, and type in short-term rentals, this area, and go there, and you might even find the answer without asking it. But usually if you don't find information on the legality, it means it is legal. That is the default, is that people can use their properties as they wish. Thank you for asking that, Elva. Now, can I advise what is the best for Dubai, short-term or long-term rentals? Unfortunately, I cannot. Now, Cass, thank you for asking that question. What I can say is that Dubai is very unique in terms of inventory growth. The amount of properties that have been added to the market, this was an almost non-existent market just 3 years ago, had less than 2,000 units. Today, it's closing in on 15,000 units. Now, what usually happens when a market grows that fast, and I'm not talking about Dubai here, I'm talking about any market that booms very fast, is we're going to see a lot of gold diggers. So a lot of these properties that are coming online, I haven't even been to Dubai, but I can guarantee you that they're providing a bad service. Second of all, there's going to be a dip in the demand. This is not demand induced. This is supply that has increased. What it means is some properties are going to be providing bad service. At the same time, there's going to be extreme competition for those guests. Rates are going to drop. And this is when those who do provide a good service have a chance to survive. It's going to be a bit tough. Rates are going to be a bit lower, but eventually it will equal out. So for Dubai and any other market that has grown extremely fast, you should expect it to get a bit harder. If you made a lot of money on short-term rentals in a fast-growing market, you should expect to make less money for a period of time until you make a lot more. You need to weed out the weeds, so to speak. So just coming back, Sergio, to your question about if OTAs penalize you, no. So if you get a 6-month booking and you block those dates on an OTA, they will not penalize you, because you have to keep in mind that every single guest that comes to a platform, if they're looking for the last weekend of August to book, the only thing that matters for a platform is that they show the best possible property that's available the last weekend in August. It doesn't matter if it was blocked the whole winter or if it's blocked next year, because they want to show that weekend. So no, it wouldn't make financial sense for an OTA to block something just because you had a 6-month booking from somewhere else. But if someone can figure out how it makes financial sense to not show a very good property at an attractive price with great reviews, then please do share with me. Elva has a great question. Any suggestions regarding hiring of cleaning crews, repair people in areas you are not living already? Now, Elva, you hit the jackpot. This is the key to to making a short-term rental successful. I think it will be hard to get peer support. Sometimes you might from your local competition, but this is really the most crucial thing you should do. And in my personal experience, I can say that just actually going there, knocking on doors, talking to people, go to a restaurant, sit at a bar, have a beer, ask other people, do you know anyone? That's the best way to get access. The challenge is that a lot of these services like cleaning or repair or maintenance, there's a lot of money in marketing it on these services online, but a lot of the companies that are marketing these services online are located somewhere completely different, maybe even in a different country, and then sell or resell those leads. You end up being a lead to local companies. So when you Google for cleaner in or house cleaning in location X, you're not actually going to find any cleaners. You will find companies who set up websites that look like they offer cleaning, but what they actually are is a call center and lead generator somewhere in a very distant and probably low-cost area. So yeah, it's a good question. I'm sorry I can't answer better than that, but what I can tell you is the opposite to what I usually give the advice. My generic life advice to everyone is just Google it, except if you're looking for a cleaner in a specific location or a plumber or an electrician, then please don't Google it because it doesn't work. You simply can't find a local cleaner anymore by Googling it. All right. Should you mark up your cleaning charges by how much? This is once again anonymous attendee, long-term fan here on our webinar. Setting the cleaning fee is an extremely important decision. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, keep in mind there's a lot of negative press in short-term rentals about fees. And that's because when you book a hotel room, typically all the fees are included there. Of course, there was a time when that wasn't true and it got a lot of negative press, but then again, nobody remembers that, right? Now, adding a cleaning fee is, of course, a way to incentivize guests to book longer stays, but it has some very bad consequences. So first of all, if you put a markup on the cleaning fee, if you charge higher than it actually costs, people's expectations go up because they, on one hand, they are looking at which fees there are, but on the other hand, you pay $1,000 for a week, you expect service for 1,000 or 10,000. It doesn't matter how many percent of that is the cleaning fee. Now, if you do set a high cleaning fee and then you ask the guests to clean before they go, that's a recipe for disaster. So you're free to set any cleaning fee you want, but do keep in mind that there has been negative press about cleaning fees, and do keep in mind the total amount of the booking, plus the fact that you might be asking them to actually do the work for you. So yeah, maybe you don't want to put them too high. Yes. Now, how can we turn an unexpected bad guest experience into a positive review? Adil, that is an amazing question. Unexpected bad guest experiences, I think it's important for everyone in this industry to understand where they're coming from. This is something that I see a lot, people complaining about a guest that has a complaint. Let's say they think, oh, I'll give a good one. It's actually fairly common. Guest is complaining about the bad weather. What's very important here is to understand that someone who has spent a lot of time and money and energy on getting to your short-term rentals didn't do it to complain about the weather. That's not at all what they want. And I've had many bad experiences myself where I have contacted the host and I get the impression from the host that I'm just contacting them because I only booked this place to complain. So for example, in one of them, they didn't have any hot water. And when I contacted the host, hey, I'm about to take a shower. I noticed there's no hot water. Is that new? They basically gave an answer that made me feel as if the only reason why I booked their place was to complain about the missing hot water. Now, a bad guest experience or complaint usually comes from many different factors. Some of them you can impact and some of them you can't. So let's say they might have been traveling by plane and the plane was late. Sure, you can't do anything about that, but if you're in touch with them and you notice that they're arriving late, you could be nice. You could say, we're sorry that you got late. Was everything okay? And they might say, no, it was a disaster. The plane first took off and then landed again, and that's why I'm five hours late. There's many things that you can have a direct impact on. Things like setting the right expectations, setting the good rates. Remember, if you're going to go for the top tier rates, you better give a top tier service. You think about the check-in experience. Do you really have a smart lock on that door? Do you really have the right code? Is it sent well enough in advance? I mean, you need to send that code before they get on a plane, because most planes don't have Wi-Fi. Most planes don't have a cell phone reception. And if they don't have the code before they land, well, it's pretty busy on an airport. It's these things that you think about. I mean, when they get in, what does it smell like? Does it smell good? Or does it smell like you're hiding something with your air fresheners? All of these things, if the guest has enough bad experiences, some of which you can impact, some of which you cannot, they will bubble up, and eventually you'll get either a complaint or a bad review. However, you can handle that with a bit of empathy, and you can prevent these other circumstances from popping up. For example, if the place smells really moldy and you cover it up with air fresheners, then maybe you should consider replacing the drywall instead, because that way you end up with guests that don't complain when the weather is bad. Thanks, Adil. Sorry for the long-winded answer here. All right, there seems to be a lot more questions here, but I'll take two more. So Brandon asked, is it important to hire an interior designer to dress the property for short-term rental? I would say yes and no. So first of all, one thing that's very critical to understand is that when you're marketing your property, people are going to be mostly looking at the pictures. I mean, yes, your location will matter. If someone is looking for a place in the Caribbean and you happen to have a place in Europe, then yeah, sorry, that's the wrong location. But jokes aside, once they have narrowed down the price range, the location, the type of property, number of bedrooms, and a bunch of other things like is it available this date, then the decision will be made based on pictures. But if you hire an interior designer to get good pictures only, probably you're still not going to make the guests happy, because something that's incredibly important is that the space needs to be functional and useful for the target audience. So for example, if you're targeting children's families, you can make very nice photos of rooms that are filled with stuff, but you know what kids' families need? They need empty space. They need a lot of floor space with nothing on it, because that's where the kids run. If you just fill it with stuff like most interior designers would do, then they're going to end up having a worse experience. So yes, it's worth it to make sure that the way you decorate the place looks good on pictures, but it still needs to be comfortable for the guests. And I can tell you that I stayed at quite a few places where I know the owner of that place has not and would never spend even one night inviting their friends over, because that's how uncomfortable it is to stay there as a guest. But that's a good test. If you're not sure if your place is nice enough, invite your friends over and you go there with them and have a nice long weekend there and see if you enjoy it, if they enjoy it. If they do, you can rent it out to anyone. But if you find your back hurting because the mattresses are so out of shape, and if you find yourself not being able to flush the toilet, probably your guests are going to have the exact same experience. All right. Now, there's a couple of questions here about Hostaway specifically. I would prefer if you send those to support@hostaway.com. We got a very fast response time. And based on our reviews, we give excellent responses there as well. And if you're not using Hostaway yet, with our product consultants would be very happy to have a short call with you and go through your needs and see, is Hostaway the right solution for you? You can sign up on hostaway.com. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining this month. It was fantastic to see so many good questions, and I hope I gave you some insight, and good luck with converting your long-term rentals to short-term rentals. See you next month. Bye.